Hello and welcome to the Ragged School Slates tutorial. So you've just watched the original preview that was released just before I took orders for the Spirit Slates. So you've opened the box, you've had a look inside, and you've also seen an example of the performance that you can do with the Spirit Slates and with the Foundling cards that I've provided you with. So you've taken them out of the box, and before you actually use them, it's advisable to watch this video fully. It's not going to be a long video. The slates are very simple to operate, but there are a few little features that make them different from normal slates, which I will cover in this video. But to get started, first of all, if you take your slates out of the box, you can see that they're pretty much identical. Now, the way to tell them apart is if you tip them up on their edge. You can see this one has an X marked on it. Now, this is the magnetic slate, so all magnetic slates are marked with this X on the edge. Now, the audio one similarly is marked, but with a single line or a 1. The way I like to remember it is it's an audio slate, so in the music charts there's a number 1, and this is the audio slate that corresponds to that. Bit of a silly way of remembering it, but it works for me. So the audio slate is always number 1. Now, to access the slates, it's very simple. They're locked together, and all we simply do is slide the top away from the bottom, like that. Okay, and this half you can just put to one side for a moment. Now, once we're inside the slate, we can see the actual audio box, which creates our slate writing sound, and the certificate of authentication number which you have. So this one is 007. For ease of use, I've also provided a guide actually inside the slate as well, so you don't have to keep referring back to this tutorial, and you don't really need to make any notes. Everything's written there. It's very simple, but we are going to go through it now on the video, just so we're double sure of how it operates. So if we look at the ports, first of all, we have the USB port. This is where you're going to charge your audio slate, and you're also going to transfer audio to the slate. When you plug this into a computer using the provided USB cable, your computer will just recognize it as an external memory source, a bit like a USB drive. And all you do is simply drag the audio files onto the slate, and it works as simple as that. As the factory default, all of the slates come out of the studio with a default audio file, which I think is probably the best one on there, and a lot of you aren't going to actually change what it does. What happens is you press the button on the remote control, there is a delay of 10 seconds, and the slate will begin to make the writing sound. Now, that 10 seconds, we'll go over shortly what that 10 seconds is for, but it allows you to operate the remote control out of sight and hear the audio hands-free in effect, which is why we did away with the external button, because the 10-second delay allows us to operate the slate covertly and still make a sound without pressing any buttons or having anything external, such as a button. If we go along, so next to the USB port, we have switch 1 and switch 2. Switch 1 operates the audio part of the circuit, and switch 2 operates the remote control unit. In order for it to work, both of the switches need to be in the on position, and when you're not using it, ensure both switches are in the off position. Otherwise, one of them will draw battery power even though it's not working, and you will have a dead battery. I have tested the battery life on these slates. On a full charge, I've charged the slate for 2 hours, and I left the slate on for another 8 hours. So I checked it every hour, and on the 8th hour it still made a noise. After that I just turned it off, because no one is really going to leave these in standby for 8 hours. But it just gives you that reassurance that if you're going to perform, you can switch them on half an hour before you perform, and as long as the battery is fully charged, you're going to have enough juice in the slate to perform without worrying about the batteries being dead. But as with anything in the magic world, always ensure your batteries are fully charged, and ensure the battery in the actual remote control fob as well is also fresh. Now, here's the remote control fob. This is a common mistake. You get people who constantly worry about the batteries in the device but don't worry about the batteries in the actual thing that's going to make it work. So this is your transmitter. You can just simply open it up with 2 screws and place a new battery inside. These all work, however they've come straight from the factory in China, so you don't know how long these batteries have been in. So before you're going to do your first serious performance, I would advise putting a new battery in this remote control transmitter. Okay. For some strange reason, it's only a 1-channel remote control, but all the fobs came with 2 buttons. So be aware that you don't want to press the wrong button. But luckily, obviously, the second button that doesn't operate anything is in this recess here. So you can feel for the recess and you know not to press the B button. The A button is nice top left and it's larger as well. So that is it. Okay, that's all that really needs to be said about the transmitter. If we go through the rest of the audio device, okay, so as we've said, they're transferred to the Slate using the USB port, and when connected to your computer, the audio Slate will show as a storage device. Just drag and drop the required MP3 to the Slate. And as we've said before, just to reiterate, to operate the Slate, ensure both switch 1, I'll do it now for you, switch 1 and switch 2 are in the on position, and then test the remote before placing the slates back together. So we'll do this now. You'll see the red light illuminate inside, and we have the 10-second delay. So this is where we're going to pass the slates to the spectator. They're going to hold the slates and they're going to hear the slates begin to write. Okay. We can now put them both in the off position. Okay, and charging is done via any 5-volt supply, ensuring both the switch 1 and switch 2 are in the off position. So the same way you would charge your Android phone, your iPhone, or anything that uses a 5-volt supply. They're so common nowadays that I really don't need to sort of go into that in too great a detail. But once your slate is ready, you can put the top back on. It just slots together, ensuring the mark aligns, because they will of course fit the other way around, but to ensure they fit together smoothly, just make sure that these marks align and you're good to go. So that is the audio slate and how it works. Very simple, no screws to undo. You can get access really quickly, but the magnets are strong enough that if you gave them to someone, they wouldn't be able to open them. Okay, as long as you know how to open them, that's all that matters. Someone is not going to discover that by sliding them apart, you can open them. So now we're going to have a quick look at the magnetic slate and the magnet plates. So here we have the magnetic slate, which we've shown before with the X, and we have our magnetic plates. Now, those of you familiar with spirit slates will be aware that previously the plates are made of steel. The problem with steel is it's heavy, and another problem is that when they move from slate to slate, you can often hear the clanking sound of steel, which makes it quite obvious. These are completely silent. And not only are they completely silent, they actually work in reverse, which means the plates don't have to fall into the slate. They can actually be lifted out, which means you can actually perform the spirit slates on a table, and the plate will lift up onto the magnetic plate and reveal the writing, which gives you an extra way of performing the slates if you wish. You can of course perform them the normal way by flipping them over if you really want to, but this new way is really clean and 100% silent. So these are made from a laminated card, okay? Now, they've also been given a blackboard treatment, which makes them identical to the writing surface on the board. Now, as you can see, that was the other way around. So if we pop it on, okay, so we have our one magnetic plate in place there. And see if we can get this one the right way around. Yeah, and there we go. That's our other plate inside. Now, when in storage, it's best to keep these plates attached like this. So because they're not made from steel and they are made from a laminated cardboard, they are going to be prone to warping if you're going to store them in a damp or humid environment. So where possible, as always, store the slates in somewhere dry, not too humid, and leave the actual slates, the plates, attached to the magnetic slate. This will ensure that they're always flat. Alternatively, you can take them off and then just leave them under something heavy to keep them flat. Okay, but as long as they remain flat and dry, you're not going to have any problems. These are also very easily replaceable. They're obviously made of cardboard, so if, for example, you get one severely water damaged or it eventually wears out, I'm not going to have to ship you out a whole metal plate. I can just ship you out a cardboard plate replacement like this, which will probably be slightly oversized so that you can trim it to exactly fit your slate, because the slates do differ in dimensions. Obviously, I've tried to get them as accurate as possible, but working in wood, as you know, it can't be 100%. So there is always a slight margin of error. So if I'm going to provide you with a new slate, with a new plate, you may just need to trim it in order for it to fit. Okay, so we'll write something on these slates first of all. Okay, so we've seen the demonstration routine with Billy Heaton. Okay, and what we're going to do is we are going to take some chalk and we're just going to write our messages on the slates. Now I'm just using conventional chalk, the chalk that comes with the slates, and we've put the magnetic slate on our magnetic plate, on the magnetic slate, because when we do the reveal, this is the position they're going to be in. The magnetic plates will have lifted over to this side. So, first of all, for the card trick, with the foundling cards, as you've seen, on the demonstration tutorial that you saw, we did Billy Heaton as the forced card. So we're going to write a message, and we're going to simply write, still looking, okay? Trying to keep the writing as childlike as possible. You can obviously do a better job of this if you want. Billy H. Okay, so that is our message. Now, when you're writing on the plate, because they're made of card, don't press too hard. Okay, it's not like a hard wooden chalkboard. You just need to write lightly, and it'll work fine. So what we can do is we can then simply take off our magnetic plate and drop it onto our audio slate like this. Okay, and then we'll see how the slates work. So this is going to use the method where the actual plate lifts off here onto the magnetic slate. Okay, and as I said before, it's completely silent, and you're able to adjust the plate out of view of the spectator as well, which is nice. So what we can do is we can place our slates like this, we can move them forward, and then obviously we ask the spirits if they have a message. But first of all, we can place a piece of chalk inside. Okay, so we can take some chalk, put the chalk inside between the two slates. The writing sound will occur, okay, and then when we take the slates apart, we have still looking Billy H and the chalk inside. Now, when you're going to use the chalk in between the slates, the gap isn't that great, okay? So you're not going to be able to put a whole stick of chalk between the slates. So what I've done here, I've taken the stick of chalk and using a knife in the kitchen, I've actually chopped the stick in half and then just cut a small piece off, and that's the perfect amount just to go inside. Okay, so we'll look at that again. So we'll take the magnetic plate off, place it on top of our audio slate. Just move this back into position so you can see. And all I did was, you can place the slates like this. As soon as you slide this into position here, the plate inside is now lifted onto the top of the magnetic plate. So all you do is, you forget to put the chalk in, as you always do with the slate routine. So as you do that, you can actually put your fingers underneath. So what I'm doing is, as I'm doing that, I'm actually feeling that the actual plate has fitted into the slate frame squarely. And you can just do that with the tips of your fingers as you lift up. And as you lift up, you put the chalk in, drop it back down. We press the remote control, and then obviously the audio sound occurs and the writing miraculously appears on the slates. Now the 10-second delay, which I was talking about, what this allows us to do is we take in between the section here, so if we go back one stage, if we go back to this section here, okay, now bearing in mind this remote control is in your pocket with the chalk as well, so keep the remote control in your pocket with the chalk. Okay, so what we do is we move the slate over. We then say we've forgotten the chalk. So as we forget the chalk, we reach into our pocket for the chalk, but we press the remote control button. Okay, this now gives us 10 seconds to lift up, deposit the chalk, put it back down, and then hand the slates to the spectator. That 10 seconds is more than enough to do that. And when the spectators hold them, they're going to hold them like this, okay? So their fingers are going to be touching the blackboard. Now the audio inside is enough to cause a faint vibration over the surface of the slate. That's going to give the impression that not only can they hear the chalk writing, they can also feel the chalk writing as well. And of course, when we take the slates and open them up, we have our message from Billy Heaton, which is of course going to match the card that was taken from the bag by another spectator. We'll go over that, how that works in a moment. What we can do is, so we can leave Billy H on that side and we'll prepare the other side. So for our other side, we have Ellie. So if we write down Ellie, Mummy, and then no more pain. And exactly the same as before, we can just carefully take the magnetic plate off, deposit it on the audio, and move it across. And we're going to simply put the slate on, move it down, place our hand in our pocket, press the button on the remote control, take the chalk out, put the chalk in the slate, hand them to the spectator, and they're going to hear the chalk writing. And when we open it up, we have our second message: Ellie, Mummy, no more pain. Now, of course, if you're going to use two messages, that means you're going to have effectively two loose magnetic plates on the audio plate. So this is the audio slate that's set up, ready for the routine. But as you can see, they're loose. Now, if you're going to hold the slate like this, then you're holding them perfectly in place, no problem at all. Okay, you just need to remember which side is which. So we have Ellie on this side, and of course we've got Billy on this side. Now, an easy way to remember is you can make a note of where the mark is. So here we have Ellie, and our mark is on the left. And when we turn the slate over, our mark is on the right, and we have Billy on this side. Okay, so the way I like to remember this one is bit sexist, but men are always right, and then Ellie's on the left. Okay, my wife wouldn't agree with that, but then again, she wouldn't. So we know that Billy is on the right because the mark's on the right, and Ellie is on the left. That's an easy way to remember it. On the slate stands you've also got, you can actually put a slate stand up and stand the slate up, and the wood on the back will keep this back plate in place until you're ready to perform, and you can just go and pick it up like this and take it away. Okay, it means you don't have to scoop it up off the table. If you're going to scoop it up off the table, the plate's going to fall off like this, which you don't want. Hence, I've provided you with 2 slate stands. So you have the slate stood up on the table, and when you're ready to perform, grab the slate, walk away, you are ready to go. We're going to have a quick look now at just caring for the actual plate itself, because as I've stated before, it's not metal, so it does require a little bit more TLC. Now, what I have here is just a piece of sponge from the kitchen, and it is very, very damp. Okay, it's just damp enough to remove the chalk from the board. Okay, and that is it. Okay, you don't want this to be soaking wet. If you do, you're going to have major problems. It just needs to be just damp enough for you to wipe that off. Almost so damp that it dries almost instantly. Okay, and then again, the same for this board as well. Very, very damp, and the chalk will come away nicely. And also remember not to draw too hard on these plates. Okay, once you've wiped your chalk off with a damp sponge, just put this somewhere nicely, set aside to dry. It will dry within a few minutes, and you'll be able to put it back on your slate, and you are ready to go again. Remember, to prevent warping, keep them attached to the magnetic slate, but not while they're wet. First of all, let them dry, then place them back on the magnetic slate and place them back in the slate boxes that you've been provided with. So we have this slate underneath as well on this one. Just give that a quick wipe off. And as you can see, just comes straight off. No problem whatsoever. So that is how the Spirit slates work. Very simple. Anyone who's familiar with Spirit slates, you'll see the benefits of using these types of slates, especially the fact that they're silent and they can be used twice. And to finish it off, you have the effect of the audio not only playing but being felt through the actual surface of the chalkboard as well. So that pretty much sums up the tutorial for the Spirit slates. Very simple to operate. Be aware of your battery levels and take care with the magnetic plates. They are replaceable via the Lebanon Circle site, so if you do get into problems, you can always order a new set. But if you do get any questions, always feel free to drop me an email. But what we're going to do now, we are going to look at the Foundling cards that came with the Spirit slates. So we're now going to take a look at the Foundling routine which came with the Ragged School slates. Now in the box you'll have also found a large school photograph which has a group photo of all of these children. These cards are the individual photos, which also goes into the greater detail on their name and the reason why they were in the Ragged School. So for example, Ruth Parsons was a street urchin, Bertie Wallace, street urchin as well. And we've got Billy, we've got Edith, all their details. Okay, it's quite a substantial deck, and you feel free to hand these out into the audience as well as the large school photograph. It can be fully inspected. What we're going to do is, though, we're actually going to force 2 of the children out of this deck to a spectator, because that forced child is going to be the one that corresponds to the message we get on the spirit slates during the routine. Okay, so we know that Billy is abandoned at birth and is still looking, and on the slates I wrote Ellie, but on the cards it's actually Agnes. Okay, so but for Agnes, her parents died of typhoid. To set up the routine, we remember that on the slates, which way on the audio slate we had the plate. So if you remember, we had it so that the Agnes or Ellie, the mark on the slate was on the left. So what we do is we open the bag up, which is a 3-way bag. Have a look inside. It's got 3 pockets. Okay. The centre part is where the full deck goes. Okay. Now, keeping the knot on the left-hand side, we're going to put all the girl cards, i.e. Agnes, in this part. And when we flip it over, with the knot on the right, we're going to put Billy in there. So we know if we're forcing the girl or the boy. So what you do is the spectator puts the whole deck back into the middle. So we hold it open, holding these 2 pockets closed. And then we go to another spectator and get them to put their hand in and pick a card out, seemingly randomly. So you tell them to feel around for the cards. Of course, they bring one out, and you tell them to keep that card to themselves and not show anybody. Okay, so they'll do that, and I'll put that to one side. Okay, then you will do a routine with the spirit slates and ask if a child from the Ragged School would like to contact anybody this evening. And of course, a female comes through by the name of Agnes, and she says, "No more pain." And her name, Agnes Knottle, is on there. You can then ask the spectator to see which card they chose, and it actually corresponds to the writing on the slate. Then that can be performed one more time. If we then move the this side, the thread of the bag over to the right hand side, again holding the pocket closed so the spectator can't get into the other pockets, they're only accessing the outside pocket, they can put their hand in and they can pull out a card, which is of course Billy Heaton. They keep that to themselves. We then see if we can contact one more spirit on the spirit slates, and then Billy comes through and leaves a message for the audience, and then the spectator reveals the card that they chose. That is the simplicity of the Foundling cards routine. Now, of course, if you are from another country, i.e. France or Germany, I've made this card available in the email I sent you, and it has all the photographs, but the text is blank. So you can actually print off children's names in your own native language. Obviously, these are very British names. So if you wanted to make it more applicable to your area where you live, then the blank cards are available online, so you can just modify it and print your own deck of cards off. And they're just printed on standard business cards, okay? So normal cardboard business cards, you'll need to age them, but there's also a tutorial I will link to that shows you how to age these cards very effectively, and then you'll have your own deck suitable for your own performance. But for those in America or England, you may find that these actually just suffice for your routine. So there we go. That is the Foundling cards routine and the Ragged School spirit slates. Thanks once again for purchasing the slates, and if you do get any problems, of course, contact me via the Lebanon Circle website or via sales@lebanonsircle.co.uk. And remember, this video is in the public domain, but it's only available via a private link. So as long as you don't link this video to give this link to anybody else, no one else other than you is going to see it. So I'd really appreciate it if you kept the link to yourself and used it for your own purposes, and that will prevent other people who've not purchased the slates from viewing the video. Thanks again.